Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we will learn a common shell scripting automation that is performed by DevOps engineers in their organizations. This is going to be a beginner friendly tutorial. I am going to cover each and every step within the script. I'm going to explain each and every step, and I will also share the script file in a GitHub gist file. You can find the link of the script in the description. Not only that, while writing this script, we will also cover security best practices and the shell scripting best practices. So make sure you watch this video till the end. Now, the first question many people would have is, okay, I have learned shell script, but what kind of projects do DevOps engineers do in their day-to-day activities? And also, this is important because during your interviews, it's most likely that interviewer will not ask you for a specific shell command. That is, what is a command to list processes? Previously, they used to ask, but now interviewers are more focused on what kind of shell scripts do you write in your day-to-day activities, or why do you use shell in your current organization? So it is better you explain a shell scripting automation project. After watching this video, you can definitely explain this project where we are going to perform a real-time and a very common shell scripting automation. Now, going back to the actual concept, what exactly is this project that we are going to learn? So what we will do is we will write a shell script where we will try to connect to a cloud provider. I will take AWS as example, but after watching this video, you will not find it difficult to replace AWS with Azure or GCP. It's just that many people have AWS accounts. So we will write a shell script which will connect to the AWS, and it will list the active resources of the services. That means this shell script can be used by your management. It can be your manager, or it can be any developers or anyone who is interested in understanding what are the active resources on the AWS account. They can use this shell script, and let's say the name of this shell script is AWS underscore resource underscore list.sh. So they can execute this shell file, followed by, they can pass two arguments. I mean, they need to pass two arguments. The first thing is the region. Second thing is the service. Let's say they pass AWS resource underscore list.sh followed by US East 1 followed by EC2. Now, when they execute this script using these arguments, it will list out all the active, that is running EC2 instances in the US East 1 region. Similarly, if they replace EC2 with S3, it will give you all the S3 resources. If they replace that with EBS, they will give you all the EBS resources that are active on the AWS account in the particular region. Most of the DevOps engineers have these kind of automation, either using shell or using Python. This is very important because cost optimization is very important for companies. So DevOps engineers write these kind of shell scripts and they execute it as part of the cron jobs. And these cron jobs are executed every day, and a email report is sent to the management. Of course, this part is optional, so that's why we will not cover this part in today's particular thing. We will focus more on how do we write this particular shell script in the best scripting standards and the security standards. So we will make sure we will write it in the best way and how exactly we need to use it. So this is what we will learn. And one thing that is important here is you need to first identify which services are used by your organization, because AWS has 200 services, Azure might have 150 services. So there is literally no point of running on all the services, because no organization use all the 200 services of AWS. Instead, what is your first task is to identify which are the services used by your organization. Let's say your organization use EC2, S3, EBS, SNS, Lambda, VPC, EFS, EKS, right? These are some of the services. What you can do is in your script, you can only allow these options, right? If user is providing any other option, let's say user provided an option called FSX, and you are not using FSX service of AWS, your script should say not a valid input. So we will also cover this part in the script. Perfect. So we can get started with writing the script. So for that, the first thing that I'll do is I will write this script in the Visual Studio Code, and then I will put this script in an EC2 instance, because a lot of people have Windows machine. It is not easy to execute a shell script. So we will use a cloud instance, a AWS cloud instance, and on that we will execute this shell script. So to start with, what we need to do is don't start writing the script. Of course, first you will start with a shebang, right? /bin bash. But even after that, do not directly start with writing the script. The first thing that you will do is you need to write the comments. So you can just say this script will list all the resources in the AWS account, and then you need to provide the author information. So in my case, author is Abhishek, or you can also provide your team name, DevOps team, so that in future, if there is any issue with this script, they can directly approach you or your team, right? And then try to write the version. Initially, when you write the script, try to put it with a lower version, so that when you feel the script is mature and when you feel that script has reached to a point of stability, you can go with versions like 1.0.0 or something like that. Okay, every time you make a change to the script, make sure you need to update this version. Okay, tomorrow if I'm changing this script, I need to change the version, so that even people will understand what exactly has changed in the previous version to this version. Okay, now I will write more about this script so that people understand what exactly is this script. I just provided this script will list all the resources in the AWS account. Now I'll say supported services by the script. Following are the supported AWS services by the script, where I can say the first one as EC2, then I can say S3. If you are wondering how the code is getting generated, I have lot of plugins and lot of extensions on this Visual Studio Code. So I will try to cover in next classes, but right now the script is getting generated using GitHub Copilot. But I have also other copilots like pieces and other things installed. I will explain that in a different video, where how am I using AI in my day-to-day life. So I use a lot of AI these days. I almost stopped writing code because code is generated from various AI plugins and assistants. So all my day-to-day job is to make sure the code is right and just improve the code that is generated by AI. I'll also teach you that for sure in the future tutorials. Okay, then let's take few services. The common ones like the DynamoDB, RDS. If you think this is not required, we can also use some things like EBS, ELB. Like, let me take input of some 15 services. VPC, CloudFormation, and IAM. These are the common ones. So I've taken these as the input. Now the next thing is you should also explain in the comments how to use this script so that your team members, today you are writing the script. Maybe your team member wants to read the script. A new joinee wants to read the script. They need to understand how to execute the script. I have explained this on the whiteboard to you, but every time you cannot explain to your colleague. So it is easy to write the usage line where you can explain region followed by the service name, right? And that's it. I think, yeah, you can also provide an example like this is how the script has to be executed. Perfect. We can just close the comment section by providing all of these. And some people also try to put all of these explanation under something fancy like this. It is also fine if you want to do it. I've seen this as a common practice for various people where they try to enclose this particular thing so that this section is highlighted in the script, which will explain the description to the users. So this is one best practice in the shell script. Even during the interviews, if the interviewer is asking to write a script, make sure you just start writing this part and you can explain the interviewer that I will add more details to it. For now, because of the limited time, I'm just only writing 1 or 2 lines in the description. Now we will start with writing the script. The first thing that you need to make sure before you write the script is when user is trying to execute this script. Some users might execute this script just by providing only one parameter. They'll just say /AWS underscore resource underscore list.sh followed by only one parameter like EC2. They will not provide the region. So you need to make sure as the first step in your script, you should perform validation. So whenever you are writing a shell script, if you have command line arguments in that shell script, make sure you perform the validation as the first step. For those who don't know what are command line arguments, so you will take inputs from the user and you will read those inputs in the script. These are called as command line arguments. So in our case, we are taking both region and service name, right? So they will become inputs to the script, or they will become a variables where we will read the values in the variables and we will use those values in the script. So that will be our first step where we will validate, check if the required number of arguments are passed. Don't worry, the script is already updated to the GitHub gist file. So see, it is updated each and every line with the same commands and all. So once you watch the video, you can also execute it at your end. Check if the required number of arguments are passed. So here what we will need to do, we need to write a if condition. So in the if condition, we will verify what is this if condition doing. If this particular thing, so in shell scripting or in the shell, there are few specific things like when you write dollar followed by hashtag, that will get the command line arguments number. We are verifying if the number of command line arguments are equal to 2 or not. If they don't provide two command line arguments, then we are saying the script has to be failed. Exit one means script has to be terminated with this particular exit code. And you also need to print an error to the user saying that, hey, you are not using the script right way. The script has to be used. $0 means name of the script. So in the shell scripting, when you execute AWS resource list.sh followed by region followed by service, this becomes command line argument 1. This becomes command line argument 2. This becomes command line argument 0. So your script name is always command line argument 0. That's why we are saying usage script name. Tomorrow, if the script name is changed also, this particular section will work. Followed by region, followed by service name. Okay, the validation part is done. What we will do next? How will the script work, right? So to write this shell script, that is, if your shell script has to talk to the AWS, the obvious way is to talk through the API. So every service of AWS, it can be EC2, it can be S3, every service of API, they have their of AWS, they have their own APIs. But if you try to directly talk to the API, you need to write a lot of code because you need to make sure the authentication is fine. You need to, for every service, when you make an API call, you need to use the curl command, and within the curl command, you have to make sure about the authentication, header, JSON data type. Instead, there is something that is called as AWS CLI. So what we can do is, instead of directly making the API call, we can use the AWS CLI and we will talk to the AWS CLI in the shell script. AWS CLI will talk to the AWS account. Indirectly, it is making the API call on your behalf. This is how we will do, whether it is shell script, whether it is Python. If it is Python, we will use Python, and instead of directly talking to the APIs of AWS, we will be using a module called as Boto3. Okay, but here in our case, Boto3 is a Python module, so we will use AWS CLI, which is supported by the shell script. So first step we need to verify is if the AWS CLI is installed or not. Why? Tomorrow, if someone deletes AWS CLI on this EC2 instance, or if you are executing this script on your local machine, if your local machine does not have AWS CLI, what's the point? The script should not work. So another validation point is to make sure AWS CLI is installed or not. So for that, what I'm doing is I'm running this command, okay, and I'm just verifying if the output of command is perfect. If it is not right, then I'm saying AWS CLI is not installed. As I've told you, you can also find it here. So even in the gist file that is available in the description, each and everything is available in the same order. Okay, now I've verified about AWS CLI. What is next? Is it enough if the AWS CLI is installed? No. We also need to configure the AWS CLI. That means initially you need to provide your AWS username and password. That is AWS secret key and access key to the AWS CLI. I'm going to do it. I will run the command called AWS configure. After installing AWS, again, we will do that. We will install AWS CLI. We will install AWS. We will run AWS configure. Only after that, after running both of these things, your shell script can talk to the AWS. Okay. Once we complete writing the shell script, then we will move towards installing AWS CLI and configuring AWS CLI on the EC2 instance. If you have a Linux machine, you can do it on your laptop itself. You don't have to create a EC2 instance. Okay, check if the AWS CLI is installed. Perfect. Now your question can be, Abhishek, what exactly is this particular code doing? Okay, so in shell script, we are using a if condition, and -d means verify if this particular directory exists. Here not symbol means if this directory does not exist, then just print AWS CLI is not configured. So again, we are using another if condition to verify if the AWS CLI is configured or not. If AWS CLI is configured, automatically this directory will get created. If you see, I have a EC2 instance here. For convenience, I am also doing it on AWS instance. If I do ls $.aws does not exist, that means AWS is not configured. It is also not installed. If I do AWS -- version, see, AWS is not installed and it is not configured as well. Once we do that, shell scripting will work. This shell script will work. Okay, now we have done these things where we have verified the command line arguments. We have verified if AWS CLI is installed. We have verified if AWS CLI is configured. The next step is to directly get into the action, and we will execute depending upon user's input. If user has inputted, let's say EC2, then a particular code has to be executed. If user inputs, let me write it. So this is the main core part of your script. If user inputs EC2, then you need to execute a particular AWS CLI command, which is AWS EC2 describe instances something. If user inputs S3, you need to execute a different command, which is AWS S3 API ls. If user inputs EBS, you need to execute a different AWS command. How will you do it? The most common thing that people would say is, Abhishek, I will use a if-else block. This is also correct, but here the interviewer will ask you, is there something that you can do better? So what we need to do is, instead of using if-else, we need to use switch case. Okay, why? Because switch case is a less costly operation when it is compared to if-else, right? In case of if-else, you will need, I mean, if you look at the complexity, the code complexity, the switch case complexity is better. I mean, it is less complex when compared to if-else, where the executor will go step by step in the if-else. If you are using switch case, the complexity will be reduced and the executor can perform efficiently. So that's why we will use switch case in this section. So execute the CLI command based on the service name. So what we will do is we will use the switch case. Perfect. So this is the switch case where case $2 in, this is the syntax for switch case. Okay, you will start with case, and whenever the switch case is ending, you will write the reverse of the case. This is common in shell scripting, right? Whenever you are writing if condition, you will start with if, and whenever you are ending the if condition, you will end it with fi, which is the reverse. Even in the switch case, you will write case and you will end it with ESAC, which is reverse of the case. So case $2 in, that means whatever is the second argument. In our case, what is the first argument? The first argument is the region. Second argument is the service name. So depending upon the service name, because region name is constant for all the services, right? So depending upon the service name, the command will change. So case $2 in, and within the in, you will write something like this, right? Case $2 in. If the input is EC2, then execute this command. If the input is S3, execute this command. If the input is RDS, execute this command. You can also write this in if else, but better you write it in switch case. Now your question can be, but Abhishek, how will I know these commands? You don't have to remember these commands. Okay. Some of these are very common, like for EC2 describe instances, for S3 list buckets. But even if you don't remember that, you can simply go to the AWS CLI documentation. Even in your interviews, you can say this, that, I only remember for few services, remember for EC2, remember for S3. If interviewer is asking you something else, you can say, I rely on the AWS CLI documentation. You can say, if I want to look for a particular service, I will simply search for that particular service. Let's say S3. Okay, AWS CLI S3. I will just search for the S3 in the documentation, and I will look for the commands, and I will look for the arguments. You can say that. So just refer to the AWS CLI documentation for each of the thing. If you want to list the buckets, if you want to copy the objects to the bucket, if you want to move the objects to the bucket, if you want to remove objects from the bucket, for everything, they will have a clear documentation where you can find the commands. So you can say that in the interview as well. I only remember few things. If something that I don't know, I will refer to the documentation. Okay, now we will take this script. Okay, I have copied this entire thing. I will go to my EC2 instance. I have created a basic EC2 instance. If any one of you are not aware how to create EC2 instance, very simple. Go to the region that is nearest to you. In my case, AP South 1, I'm in India. So AP South 1 is the nearest region. I will go to this particular region, click on the launch instance, provide any name, you can say demo, select the Ubuntu instance because I am going to explain on Ubuntu. Then use the T2 Micro basic free instance. Select a key value pair. If you already don't have, click on the create new key value pair. It will generate a new key value pair on your local, and just click on the launch instance. Once you have the instance, key value pair gets downloaded on your local machine. I will also show you how to connect to it. Just go to the downloads folder. Okay, even if you are on Windows machine, go to the downloads folder and run this command ssh-i. My PEM file name is d7f-demo.pem. Whatever is your PEM file name, you can use that. Followed by Ubuntu @ once your instance is created, you will find for this particular instance a public IP address. Okay, go to that particular public IP address and paste it here. That's how you can log in. Make sure you go to the downloads folder. And which terminal you have to use? You can use, if you're on Windows, you can use command. Okay, better use PowerShell or Git bash. Now let's copy AWS resource _ list.sh. So I have copied the same one, _ resource list.sh. So I have the same one already copied on my EC2 instance. While uploading it to the gist file, I have already uploaded to this EC2 instance as well, exactly the same file. Okay. Now, if you run this particular thing, see, I will just run AWS _ resource list.sh followed by AP _AP-south-1 followed by EC2. The script has to fail. Why? We have written the validation check. Okay. The first thing that we have written is a validation check, where within the validation check, we have made sure, sorry, this one. Within the validation check, we had made sure two services are provided. This is meeting, but I have not installed AWS CLI. So let's see if it complains that AWS CLI is not installed. Let me run it. Perfect. It said AWS CLI is not installed. Let me do another thing. Now what I will do is I will provide only one input. I'll just say EC2. See, it said, no, you are doing it wrong. This is the usage example and this is the actual example, how you need to run it. So end user will also understand it. Now the next thing is, okay, let's go ahead and install AWS CLI. For that, again, go back to the AWS CLI documentation. And in the AWS CLI documentation, okay, we moved to a wrong location. Go to the user guide. And in the user guide, you will find a section, get started. You will find install and update. First thing that you do on this machine is run sudo apt update. Okay, once you update the apt repositories, then what you will do is go to the Linux section. Copy the curl command first. Okay, before that, you also need to install unzip. So let's run sudo apt install unzip. Now you can directly copy it from here and run this command. I already have a readme file. So it says, okay, let me replace everything. You will not run into this issue. Perfect. So now I'm expecting AWS CLI is installed. Let's verify AWS --version. AWS version. Okay, there is some issue in the installation. Let me verify. I think because I have deleted on this instance. Okay, I had to remove few things. Now, if I run AWS --version, you can see AWS CLI is installed. Let's see if our shell script is also understanding that. If it can understand that I have installed AWS. So now if I do AWS underscore resource underscore list.sh followed by AP-south-1 followed by EC2. It said AWS CLI is not configured. That means the installation error is gone. Now it asks us to configure. How can you configure? Very simple. Just go to your AWS account, go to the security credentials, and what you need to do is you just need to scroll down. You will find this section called access keys. You can only create 2 access keys. So let me delete one. And when you are working in your organization, you actually don't use the root account. You will not even have access to the root account. So for the DevOps team, you will be provided with an IAM account. So you will do it with that particular IAM account. Okay. So you will have an IAM account called DevOps team or DevOps user or your particular user. You can use that. So we will run AWS configure command. So first thing it will ask for access key, provide it. Then it will ask for secret key, provide that. Default region, I will configure it as AP South 1, nearest to me. JSON is the output. Perfect. After this video, I will delete this access key. So no problem. You also make sure you delete the access key once your work is done. Now, let's run the same command again. So this time it has to give me list of EC2 instances running in AP South 1. Let's see. Perfect. It said there is an instance running. It said this is the name of the instance. Let's see in AP South 1 if I have an instance or not. Okay. Region, I will change to AP South 1. First, I will go to EC2 service. Okay. Region is already AP South 1. Instances. Okay, there is one instance. Let's verify if it's the same instance. If I do Control F, perfect. So this is the same instance that got listed. Now let's change the input and pass the input as, okay, what happened? Dot slash. Okay. So now let's change the input and pass the input as S3. Listing S3 buckets. See, it was able to list the S3 buckets as well. Let's see if the S3 buckets that are listed are perfect. So if we go to S3, I need to find Megametrics, GiliumX, middleware logs, payment app logs. See, these are the things. So our AWS CLI is working. Now the next stage is to just put this AWS CLI in a cron job. So you can take that as an assignment. How will you write a cron job and put this in the cron job? Just make it execute every day at 9 p.m. Okay, or it's an optional thing if you want to implement or not, because these days people don't use depend upon organization, but if you want to do it, you can do it. Otherwise, this is more than enough to explain to the interviewer. So I hope you found this script informative. One final thing before we conclude this is, whenever you are doing this, make sure that you provide only execute access to the other users. That means whoever is running this script, they are the developers or the management team. They don't need to have the permissions to view or edit this particular script. So what you will do is grant permissions chmod 711. That means you have all the permissions. Your group has execute permissions. If you feel that, Abhishek, my team is DevOps team, everyone in my team should also have the access. So you can say 771 followed by AWS AWS underscore resource list dot sh. Now, apart from you, in my case, I have logged in with Ubuntu user. So only Ubuntu user and the group that belongs to Ubuntu user. If you log in with Abhishek, that is only Abhishek and the team of Abhishek, which is the DevOps team, will have read, write, and execute. 4 plus 2 plus, I have explained this in previous videos, right? 4 plus 2 plus 1. 4 means read, 2 means write, 1 means execute. So when you want to grant read plus write plus execute, it becomes 4 plus 2 plus 1. So I am granting 7 to myself, 7 to my team, only 1 to everyone. That means only execute. If you want to grant write and execute, you need to change this to 3. If you want to grant only read and execute, Abhishek, they should not be updating the file. They can read it and they can execute it. Then change it 4 plus 1. But usually it is a best practice only provide the execute access, because if you have any sensitive information, you don't want others to read it. So just provide 771. So this is how you can also secure your shell script. One of the way, other ways are also possible. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Thank you, everyone. See you all in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.